Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. A while ago, I was sent a book. Here it is, Coffee or Chemo. And I do get sent quite a lot of books, actually, and they are all very interesting, very fascinating. This one really appealed to me because we've been talking recently about certain medical interventions that people have had to endure or have been almost insisted that they take. Choice was almost pretty much taken away. The National Health Service has come under a lot of criticism, of course, for being part of that. And the lady I'm going to interview today who wrote this book, Edina Atkinson, is I would say, a skeptic of our current medical institutions. She is an entrepreneur and obviously an author. And at the beginning of the book, she goes into quite horrific detail about the scare she had when she went for I suppose, a test, as many people do at their GP or with a small complaint. Edina, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank you so much for agreeing to chat to me about your splendid book. Now, I confess immediately I haven't got to the end of it because people do send me loads of books, but I have ploughed my way through a lot of it. And it's a lovely read in terms of easy to read, easy to understand. But oh my goodness, you do dish up your thoughts, your worries, your concerns. And I really felt for you as you were going through the process, and then you went over to Germany to seek alternative advice and help. So we're going to explore a bit of that. So thank you very much for coming on to the show. And I hope all is well with you. As I say, I haven't quite got to the end, so I'm hoping that all is well with you.
Yes, it is.
Brilliant. Excellent. Now, your book obviously is the sort of book that a lot of people will immediately warm to because they may have been in a similar position to you, and we'll get to that in a minute, or they're very fearful of being in that initial position where you go to the GP and they spot something or confirm something, and in the way it was described to you by the GP was absolutely awful, with no tact or humanity, and then you're kind of left on your own with that fear growing in your head, which just seems to compound the very situation you're in. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what the book is about, and then perhaps we can go through where you have come from or where you are now as a result of the process that you went through, and also whether the book was cathartic in writing it.
Well, just before I start, I would like to make a disclaimer. I state this talk does not provide medical advice. It's not a substitute for medical advice from doctors and is for informational purposes only. No material in my book is ever intended to be a substitute for any professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your doctor or other qualified medical healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. I state I am not a doctor. This is simply me and Richard chatting about my own personal journey after a devastating diagnosis. I state that I do not negate medicine or disrespect any medical procedures. Macmillan does state on their website that it is a good idea to think about the possible benefits and disadvantages of treatment to help make the right decision for you. There is no right or wrong answers. No medical treatment can be given without your consent. Unquote. Remember, it is always a choice. So that's what
And
I decided to do. I made the choice. It wasn't an easy choice because there didn't seem to be many people going down the same route. Many people, even on the alternative path, were saying, why don't you just try conventional treatment? And I said, because I just can't subject my body to that. I did know someone who had been to Germany a few years before, and I did contact her to say, what do you think I should do? And she gave me the details for this place in Germany. And I made a decision there and then that that's what I was going to do, give myself the best possible chance for my body to recover and heal naturally. Yeah.
Well, and that must have been a frightening thing, because we are told in every authoritative way that conventional medicine is the best that we can have. And the government, of course, is spending millions of our taxpayer money on these massive institutions. In fact, I often go for a walk in the evenings, and where I am, I stroll around the local hospital here, and I've seen this building expand and expand, and get bigger and bigger, and the car park fuller and fuller of more people feel that is the only thing that you can do, is to go, if you're feeling ill in any form, is to the hospitals. And we've certainly seen in recent times with the virus thing that floated about, that a lot of people felt that was the only option. And in fact, the government and medical professions were pretty much saying, if you don't do that, you're stupid if you don't follow our guidance. However, of course, before the NHS, we had all sorts of people, some quacks, but some wise people, who had a whole load of alternative approaches. And we've almost thrown those away in the belief that the new medical science is the only answer. So let's go back to the beginning. You tell us, for the, so there's no doubt, we're talking about I'm very fearful about using the word on YouTube because of the algorithm. We had that virus thing that went round, and that was given a name with the third letter of the alphabet. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the big one that everybody fears getting, just so that everyone's clear. So we don't have to actually mention the word, just in case, because I'd rather people were able to see this video and hear your story than YouTube find medical misinformation to take it down. So, in your own words, it would be great to hear how you, first of all, thought that there was something wrong.
Because I had ridden horses for quite a while, I used to wear a body protector, which was quite a tight piece of kit. It was like a polystyrene shell that used to zip up the front and used to crush your chest like Anne Boleyn. And I used to fall off this horse quite a lot. And I probably did what I would call soft tissue damage. But you need to be very mindful when you are going to seek a diagnosis, because it almost seems that any kind of damage can be seen as something bad, something that we all dread to hear. And I didn't fit what they talk about as the C profile. I've always been healthy. I've always eaten well. I've always exercised. I would consider myself to be spiritual, not religious. And I suppose I've been soul seeking all my life. So when I did get this diagnosis at the GP, because he said, let's hope it's not that, but the fact that he already said it was just dreadful. It still didn't feel real. And many people said that I was in denial. They said, you need to accept the facts. And I said, but I can't accept facts without real evidence. So I went to the hospital and had something that I thought I would never have, which is where they crush the tissue and they radiate to see what they can see. And then they do biopsies, which were pretty awful. And even though the doctor was walking out, I said to her, could you tell me what I've got? And she said, well, she called the doctor back And he said, "What do you think you've got?" And I thought, well, that's a kind of a strange question to ask me when I've just asked a question. And he
Yes.
told me there and then that I'd got it, even though he'd got no evidence to prove what I'd got.
So you
So
hadn't
when I
waited
went
for the
back,
tests. Yeah, hadn't waited for the test to come
no,
back or anything.
no. And I said to the nurse, "How does he know?" And she almost put her finger to her nose and just said, "He just knows." And I thought, well, that's a strange way to diagnose someone. So when I went back for the official diagnosis, how could they backtrack when they'd already told me that I'd got it?
Yes. And
So
meanwhile, that must have been festering on your
it was
mind.
festering all over Christmas. It was probably one of the worst Christmas. 2011 was probably the worst Christmas because I didn't eat anything because I thought everything was carcinogenic. I just couldn't eat anything.
Yes. And so the time between the tests that you went for and then the final results, that was what, before Christmas and then after Christmas. So you had to wait a number of
Yes,
weeks,
yes, yes. It was
which,
about 2 or 3 weeks, but I'd already made my mind up that I was going to
yes,
Germany.
right. But I'm just thinking in terms of the NHS, and I know, in with recent events, the waiting list and the prognosis of more people suffering the disease we're talking about is huge. But it's such an anti-human system if you've got to wait 3 weeks, and they sort of cast a spell, if you like,
Mm,
upon you by suggesting, well, I know, and it's that, which is just a matter of waiting to be confirmed now. And you're spending 3 weeks over Christmas with no doubt loads of family and friends asking you inordinate
yes,
number of questions about
yes,
how you feel about it, what are you going to do, and all. It must have been ghastly.
yes,
And presumably other people are going through this all the time.
yes. Um, when I did go back for the official diagnosis, which was the beginning of January, um, they did say, we can get you in for surgery within 3 weeks. Um, and I said, no, thank you. I don't want surgery. And that felt very scary because
Mm.
it almost felt traitorous turning down this treatment that was being offered to me by the NHS.
So in a way, because you then started to make up your mind that you would seek a second opinion and a different alternative treatment, those 3 weeks may have been more useful to you, because if
Yes,
if they'd said immediately, oh, we'll get you straight in and start you on treatment, you would probably, I'm not saying you, but one, if it was me, you may well say, oh, great, you can do something immediately because early intervention has got to be good, one would think.
I always knew that if I did ever get diagnosed, I would um, reject the treatment to begin with, and do my due diligence and do my research as to what works and what doesn't work. It's my body and it's got to last me for my whole life.
Yes.
And I just didn't want to go through treatment from what I'd seen, the evidence that I'd seen. People ended up sicker than when they went, and that didn't seem to me to be positive healing.
No, no, absolutely. So you made your decision and you went to Germany. Tell us about
Yes.
that.
It was someone that had been there before me. It was a place called 3E, and it was just outside Stuttgart. So I I caught the plane from Heathrow, and that was quite scary, just even getting on a plane and leaving my own country behind. Um, and this place was a mixture between um, almost like a conference center, a clinic, a retreat. It was all made out of wood and glass. It was in a forest high up in the mountains. It was a very beautiful place. Um, and they actually said to me when I arrived, which I found quite startling, they said to me, "Do you want to live or do you want to die?"
Wow.
you have to make a decision.
Gosh, I wonder how many people say, "Oh, hello, yes, I'd like to die, please." I mean, what a strange question. Did you go on your own?
Yes.
So you boarded the plane on your
Yes.
own. Do you speak
Yes.
German?
No.
No, I know that because you sit in the book. But yeah, so that was very brave in and of itself.
I think because of hearing what someone else had told me about this place, and how they look at you as a whole being. So it's mind, body, and spirit. We're not just a broken down clock where you can just flick the back off it and replace a broken part, or we operate on all three levels. And I remember even silently shrieking in the hospital, "You may want to cut something out of me, but who's going to mend my broken psyche?" Because
Mm.
they reminded me in Germany, a diagnosis is a stop sign in the road. However, you've been living your life, this is the stop sign that said you need to go in a different direction. And that could be to do with health, your job, a relationship, your family setup, whatever it is, has brought you to this point, and you need to change it.
So how different was the E3 place or three? Which what did you say it was 3E or E3? I can't remember.
3E.
3E. How different to our system over here, the National Health Service?
It was. It actually started off as a detoxification. So I was put on a diet protocol called the Budwig Protocol. Dr. Joanna Budwig worked for the German government in the 1950s, and she was actually ordered by the German government to find the link between this condition and essential fatty acids, and she did. And then she subsequently got sacked because obviously they didn't like her findings. But mainly it's about the essential fatty acids and the oxygen. But she did go on to say she could cure this. These were her words. She could cure a woman of this particular condition. But if she went back to a wife beating husband, she would indeed die. This is about life changes. It's not just about the treatment, the medicine, the food, or whatever it is. It's how are you going to change as a person? So that was, and they do the detoxification because there's lots of things going on. I had a live blood test, which I think is sometimes called dark field analysis. So they can see whether your blood is oxygenated. Mine wasn't, obviously, because of stress. They can also see toxins live within 30 seconds of taking this blood out of your finger. So they can see what's going on. If your blood cells are all stuck together like melted chocolate buttons, you're probably in a bit of a bad state because all these red blood cells should be floating around freely. Mine were all
I've
stuck together.
well,
And
I've seen. Julia, my partner, and I went to see Harry Rhodes, who does a lot of blood work, and he
yes,
demonstrated exactly what you're talking about, how the blood cells get clumped together. And actually, he was showing that if you drink structured water,
yes,
it immediately starts to free up those things. And not only, and here's the amazing thing, I don't know whether this was covered, but he demonstrated how somebody had their blood taken out of their finger that you looked at under a microscope. The lady, and it was all clogged together, the lady drank the structured water. Subsequently, he took another blood sample and we looked at that. But before he did that, the sample that had been taken previously started to unclump because water can talk to each other.
yeah.
Which is, I mean, we almost fell out of our chairs. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So, how long were you? How long were you there, and how did you feel when you? What happened when you came back?
I was there 5 weeks. I watched a lot of videos to do with Bruce Lipton and the biology of belief. I found that so helpful. And we did a detoxification. I wasn't very comfortable with the colonic irrigations, but we did used to have to do coffee enemas. But when I was lying there with this coffee enema, thinking, what would I rather have? Organic coffee and clean water going through my system, or chemotherapy?
Which
And
is, I guess, the title of your book.
yeah, and as I was
Coffee or
lying
chemo?
there, I thought, as insane as it seemed at the time, I'm thinking, at least this can do me no harm. The
Yes.
worst that it can do is nothing. And I can't say that about the other treatments back here in the UK. They harm.
It's interesting you talk about the coffee enemas, because I interviewed Daniel Thompson Mills about a month or so ago, and he said and explained how these coffee enemas work, and he said they were the best thing since sliced bread. So and so some people may be hearing that for the very first time, as indeed I did when he was explaining it to me. And if people want to find out about that, I'll put a link to the video. So now it's interesting you talk about Bruce Lipton, because he's the scientist who looks at the quantum physics and how the mind influences our body and healing and sort of thing. Now, so maybe you could tell us how that starts to influence your life and your own personal healing.
One of the sessions that I had with one of the directors there, he said, what's your kind of financial setup back in the UK? And I thought, well, that's a strange question to ask. And I told him how I was doing this job that was working with the homeless, that I had to do it because of the financial implications. He said, so you would claim to have a poverty mindset? And I said, yeah, possibly. He says, well, go away and write down what you've got, your assets and everything that you've got. And I thought, well, that's a strange thing to ask. When I went back the next day, he said, it's funny, your definition of poverty doesn't match mine. He said, you're not poverty stricken. And it was all changing of that mindset. And he said, why are you doing this job when you possibly could change things along the line here to do with financial things? And I immediately rang my father straight after and told him to put my property on the market, because I needed the income and I was going to do something different, something quite outrageous, really.
Wow.
So that's what I did while I was there. I'm not poor. And yet I had that mindset of poverty.
And where do you think that mindset came from?
Oh, I think it's a childhood thing. My mum was very thrifty, and she was always trying to save money. And I think that it's just something that you grow up with. And I've known quite a few wealthy people, and even though they say, I've got this much coming in a month, and I'm still broke. And I'm thinking, my goodness, if I had £4,000 coming in a month, I would think I'd won the lottery. But it was their mindset. Their mindset is poverty stricken. So whether it's 4,000, 400, or 40,000, it's the mindset.
Yes.
And that was interesting.
That is interesting. And likewise, I know people who live in big houses and their kids go off doing riding and things like that. And then they say, but we don't have any money. We haven't got any. And you think, just have a look round for a moment, because I think you do. It's just, you're obviously spending it very quickly here, there and everywhere, and you've got nothing left. So that's fascinating. And of course, a lot of people will have had parents who were brought up by other parents who were in the war and had that same sort of thrifty, we haven't got two pennies to rub together. They may well have gone through the rationing that happened after the war, and all that. So a lot of this, what you're talking about, I would imagine there's a lot of people out there who have similar mindsets
Mm.
and are stuck in that sort of ever decreasing circle and not being able to get out of it. So, I mean, changing your mindset though is a huge thing to do. How did you do it?
Well, when I came back, my daughter met me at Heathrow and she said, "Oh my goodness, Mum, you look amazing. You look like you've come back from a spa." And I said, "Well, isn't that what healing's meant to be about? You're meant to look better than when you went."
Yes.
Um, so she was very surprised when she saw that. Despite that, coming back to the UK, and trying to find the foods that I could continue my protocol, there was still a lot of fear. I can't say that I came bouncing back with confidence. People were skeptical themselves. They were asking me what I did. But the main thing is the people in Germany said, if you sense that someone's going to be derogatory or not very kind to the route you've taken, said, stop talking. Said, do not waste your energy with people who's going to mock what you've done.
Mm.
Um, so I was very mindful who I was speaking to. People had asked, well, what have you done? And someone even said to me at the time, I think her daughter had gone through conventional treatment, and she actually said, so what's so special about you that you don't have to have chemotherapy? And I thought, well, with a question like that, how can I answer? And I
Yeah.
couldn't answer. There is no answer. It was
No.
a choice.
Yes. And a brave choice, really,
Um,
considering the amount of pressure that there is just one way of dealing with it.
it was strange because when people used to say that to me, and even you saying it to me now, when I see what people go through with conventional treatment, the pain, I'm
Mm.
thinking, they are the brave ones. They are courageous. They have this they have this faith in medicine that I don't have, and I just think they are so courageous to go through all that pain, because I know that these treatments take a lot out of people, and I'm
Yes.
thinking they're brave.
Yes. No, no, I totally agree. I
Mm,
suppose I'm just highlighting the fact that we have, what with the advertisements on the telly and on the internet now, and the sort of conversation that you see in mainstream media, like so many people, so many of my viewers, of course, will know this, that we're being sold a narrative as if that's the only course of action, and if you don't do it, you're a fool. You mentioned Sarah Myhill at the beginning, who I've interviewed here on the show. Well, you mentioned it before we recorded, actually. And I told her the story of how I lost my eye, and it was 4 years. It was a nightmare, with the NHS. And at the time, I thought they were doing the best they could, and I had 3 cornea transplants. I had to have 4 years of having the curtains drawn. Couldn't really go out. So I still had to go and drive and work. I shouldn't have been on the roads, really. And in the end, I had my eye removed, and I have a false eye. Sarah Myhill said, "It's a shame you didn't know me, because I would have prescribed some iodine, and you
yes.
would have had your eye now." And yes, I suppose I was quite brave to go through those 4 years and do it. I'd rather just
Yeah.
put a few drops, not being brave, and just stuck some iodine in and got rid of the bug. And it's amazing they didn't actually think of that. So I understand now, having gone through some hardship myself, that there are different ways of approaching
Yes.
this, and I think that's very much the message that you're imparting here to us. So take us beyond. Then you've come back and you've got a change of mindset. How, what happened next?
Um, I was doing a job, um, working working with people with mental health issues that were on the verge of making themselves homeless. Obviously, if they make themselves homeless, nobody can actually rehome them if they've intentionally done that. But with mental health, you don't really know. So it was quite a taxing job. And I realized that possibly I needed to give that up. I didn't give it up straight away, but I realized that there was a time limit to this job because um, it was burnout. I did go into some homes that they had hoarding issues and that kind of thing. And some of these places, you probably wouldn't even put an animal in there. So it was heartbreaking and quite taxing. But I started to do some research into what I was going to do. I knew that I needed to release the capital from this property and that I was going to do other things with this capital. Um, and it was a case of trying to do something that if this was something that was going to take me down, then I needed an income that would come in regardless of whether I went to work or not. Because you just can't survive if you have to give up a job. And people say, well, you could have taken the treatment. The treatment could have seen me a year, 2 years, 5 years off work, just struggling with the treatment. And I've got a life to lead, and I couldn't do that. I just came back. And the day that I came back, I went to work the following day because I was well and healthy and continued contributing. So,
And so since that moment when you came back, you've had no fear or reoccurrence of the original problem.
the fear will sometimes come around this time of the year because it was December when I started
Yes.
going to the GP and it all happened over Christmas. When I came back, I would say that um, probably Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'd be gripped in fear. And Friday it would start to dissipate, and Saturday I felt okay, and then it would come up again. But it was getting shorter. So it was only Monday where I used to feel, who am I kidding? Maybe
Mm.
this is just going to take me down. Um, but the more that I did the research, and thank goodness I did the research back in 2012, because that research that I looked at doesn't exist on the internet anymore. It's gone.
So
And
what?
I find
Yeah.
that quite sad. Even some of the references that I have in the back of my book, there's one about the charities syndicate. That book doesn't exist anymore. It's been taken away.
That's interesting.
Mm,
Yes, and of course people have told me that various so-called cures for certain things have
yeah.
in recent years been removed, and we've seen how the big pharma has made things such as certain drugs during the pandemic sound as if they were a load of rubbish. And of course, now, of course, the truth is coming out that actually they were very helpful to a lot of people and was saving lives. But even so, if you talk about it, it comes in waves on YouTube. Sometimes you can get away with it, and sometimes you can't. Um, so th- when you started, what made you want to write the book?
The people that were very interested in my story kept saying, you should write all this down. You should write a book. Um, and I thought, well, there's no real happy ending. I don't go to the NHS and get the all clear, even though I've spoken to people that's got the all clear. They find out that 2 years later it's come back. So maybe that isn't such a like a
Mm.
big thing after all. Um, and I suppose it's like anything that life is just life and you're never cured. You can arrest something on a daily basis, a monthly basis, a yearly basis, but ultimately, at some stage in our lives, we're all going to die. Um, so people say, well, is that it then? Are you cured? And I'm saying, well, 12 years on, here I am with no medical intervention at all. And I'm not saying that that's going to work for everyone because had to do a lot of soul searching. Um, and sometimes the mental anguish can be as painful as physical anguish, things
Yes.
that you have to sort through, um, friends that you thought were friends that you have to let go of, old habits that no longer serve you. Um, they all have to be let go of. I used to live in the Midlands, but I knew that at some stage I wanted to move to East Anglia. I wanted to be near the sea. I live near the sea now, which is really good. Um, but I can even remember saying to the the consultant at the time, I said, with all due respect, I said, I'd rather take my own chances, and I'm going to move to the coast at some stage, and I'd rather go with dignity, walking along a beach, than allow you to do what you wanted
Yes.
to do to my body. And that
But
isn't for everyone. That is just the way that I felt.
and you say that there's no all clear sort of sign, but I suppose if you're well, you're well.
You're
I
well.
mean, you were well before the doctor said that
Yes.
you weren't,
Yes.
and and this sort of notion that somebody else can tell you
Yes.
whether you're well or not,
An authority.
an
An
authority,
authority. People
and they
wait.
may be
Oh,
wrong.
I can't live until I've got my test results back. And I was thinking, no, you've got to live anyway, because
Yes.
those test results could be wrong. I know that when my test results went in to this hospital at that particular time, 2011 and 2012, their pathology department was under investigation. They'd got a
Oh
lot
right.
of things wrong. They weren't doing the fixing or the setting right with the blood tests. And you just think, well, excuse me, that my slide may just be a number, but that is my life. So if you get it wrong, that is my life that you're saying I, I've either got it or I haven't. So, and I did speak to someone whose husband was a pathologist, and she told me all kinds of stories that I'm thinking, I'm glad that I took my chances, because it just didn't inspire me with confidence.
No, not at all. And you say on your book that the disease in question no longer scares you, but conventional treatment does.
I think now, because I've always been interested in law, common sense law, but all sorts of things, because I always say to people I've listened to people talking all kinds of setups with councils and things like that. And I'd want to say to them, where's your evidence? People start off, I believe the people of this town need whatever it is. And I'm thinking, where is your evidence? You are making a decision, say, on behalf of 12,000 people, but there's no evidence to support your statement. And if you went to court, the judge would not hear you unless you'd got evidence. So when people say to me, well, it's the doctor's opinion, well, opinions aren't good enough for me. I need evidence. How can I
Yes,
make a life choice on someone else's opinion? And who knows what frame of mind they're in on that day? They're making an opinion about your life.
yes, absolutely. And we've seen, I mean, also, I mean, if you go back to your GP, I mean, I remember when I was a youngster, there was a family doctor who knew the family. And even 30 years ago, when my first children were, well, first children, my only children, when my children were born, we had a family doctor. It was one doctor, and you could see the doctor, and he would see all of us in one sitting. It wasn't book another appointment if you've brought another sibling with you, or a child. There was a sense that they were actually interested. Even if they weren't interested, there was a sense that they were interested in you. You weren't just a number, and you didn't continually see lots of different people. So you had a human connection with one another, and I suppose they might argue, well, there's just too many people, there's not enough hours in the day to do that these days. And you think, well, that's very strange, because you could just have more GPs to cope with the numbers. It does seem very odd. How much of this journey was spiritual, would you say?
80 to 90% of the journey is spiritual. Yeah.
And so going forward, which is a horrible expression, but in the future, should other things arise, even like migraines or headaches or less dramatic illnesses affect you, do you use your mind, your positivity, your spirituality to approach all of that? Has it? I mean, presumably this has given you a whole sea change, if I can use that term, in how you deal with everything.
I think because I'm still a physical body and not just a spirit, I do use techniques. I know there's a lady called Barbara Wren who wrote a book called Our Return to the Light, because I feel that when the body starts misbehaving, it's in darkness, it needs the light, it needs oxygen, it needs all these things. I do some techniques. I try and eat healthily, hydrate, ground. Um, I don't take loads and loads of supplements because I believe that they have like a short term, a rebalance. The spiritual side, I do a lot of writing. I feel what I feel. Sometimes I feel quite a lot of anger. And I know in our society, we're told to suppress anger. Well, there's another doctor called Dr. Gabor Matier, and he wrote a book called When the Body Says No. And he actually states that the good people were dying early because they just hadn't got the capacity to say no to their job, to their spouse. And they continued going when their body was saying no, and they were still smiling and saying yes. And I know that I probably did quite a lot of people pleasing in my past. I'm probably not known for people pleasing now. In fact, probably some people find me quite blunt, because people say, "Oh, I know you, and I know you will speak up." And I'm thinking, well, that is the only way. We can't keep hiding ourselves under a bushel. And yes, I would love a T-shirt that said, "I do not consent," because that seems to be my mantra at the moment. I do not consent because nobody has the authority to make decisions for me
Yes.
in any shape or form, whether it be financial, health, where I live, what I pay, all these kind of things. I think this past 3 years has shown me so much, and I'm so glad that I actually found my recovery, my ongoing recovery from 2011 and 2012, because I know that I would find it very difficult now that things are censored. You can't get access to things. And even because I chose not to have the medical intervention, I wouldn't have been able to go to Germany.
Yes.
And that always, when we were in lockdown, I was thinking, imagine being diagnosed now. I couldn't go
Yes.
to Germany and learn everything that they taught me.
Yeah.
So I have a sense of gratitude for my diagnosis at the time. I felt as though it prepared me for now. I was probably aware of something strange, probably when the Twin Towers came down. I think that was the year
9/11.
99, wasn't it?
Mm.
I knew something was amiss then, and I knew something nefarious was coming, to do with everything, to do with health, finance, the way we live. But I genuinely didn't believe that it would happen in my lifetime. I genuinely believed that I'd be gone. But everything that's been happening this past 3 to 4 years has been a real shock. And I'm just grateful that I got a head start in my awakening as to what's actually happening.
So clearly, your gut, then your gut feeling was very much pushing you in the direction that you went to, and you did listen to your gut, whereas a lot of people don't listen to their gut instincts, their natural instincts. and feel the pressure on many things, like the medical intervention, that they may have gone, oh, I have to go along with it, because the herd mentality sort of makes you go, well, he's had it and he's had it, and I suppose I better do it. And of course, certain work professions were forced into having it if they wanted to keep their job in that instant. How important would you say then your gut instinct is?
Very, very. And sometimes I don't even know why I've taken a certain route. It just feels right. Certain things, and it's not like I can see into the future. I get a sense of what is right for me. And even when March 2020, I knew, with friends of mine that work in medical research, I knew the next thing would be some intervention. And I made a decision there and then, after all that I went through with this diagnosis, and knowing how quickly that was kind of rolled out, I knew that I wouldn't do that either. And I did become almost like a recluse because I felt it difficult. One of the main things they told us in Germany, they said, never, ever, ever restrict your oxygen. You need oxygen to keep the body healthy. So when I saw sick and healthy people going around with a face covering, I thought, why are they doing that? They can hardly breathe anyway, especially if they've got lung conditions. And all I could think of was, on that cloth, you're basically reabsorbing your own carbon dioxide. So I did have a lanyard, because obviously I got stopped quite a few times, and I wasn't going to explain my medical procedures or my way, because that contravenes the 2010 Equalities Act. I don't need to share why I don't put a muzzle on my face. And it was all those things, and even seeing people just kind of walking around. I actually couldn't shop. I had to send my partner shopping because I just couldn't bear to see what was happening. I think when you can see these things clearly, and you see nearly everyone conforming, you feel like some kind of freak yourself.
Yes, I do know. I know that feeling very well. Although a lot of the information that you have been able to research has been taken away, do you feel that now, at this moment, the ability to come on shows like mine, the fact that my show has yet to be, I say yet to be, has not, and hopefully won't be, shut down, and that there is information out there still, maybe not quite as blatant as perhaps it ought to be, or as obvious, information is coming out, that alternative ideas and suggestions very much coming out at this moment, no matter how much the whack-a-mole of the government is trying to sort of stop it. And the fact that you can produce a book which tells your story and shares really your philosophy on why you've done what you've done, and the results of where you are today. That must give you some hope.
It does give me hope. And this is why I've never set up a website or anything like that. The book is out there. People can read it. If it helps them, even if it helps them to make some kind of integrated decision to say, right, I'm going to have this one treatment, and then I'm going to do this treatment or this alternative or this kind of natural way, and integrate it, because one size really does not fit all. For me, the NHS one size didn't fit me, but equally what I've done over this past 10, 11, 12 years isn't going to fit someone else. So it really is a case of like looking and questioning yourself. Does this work for me? How do I feel about changing my diet regime? I knew for me that when they put me on the diet protocol, I'm thinking it's not the food. And I can always remember someone saying to me, oh, are you having milk in your tea? I'm thinking, do you know what? a splash of skimmed milk in my tea is not going to kill me. So I can see when people get on these protocols, there's a lot of fear. Shall I be eating this? Should I be taking that? Should I be in the sunlight? Should I be blocking the sunlight? All these things, all these questions, but it's whatever's natural. I haven't used any sun cream probably for the last 15, 17 years, because I knew a long time ago that for me to put that on my skin was probably going to increase what they warn you about it's protecting
Yes.
against. So I know
I
that's a
th-
bit of a backward way round, but
no,
I
but
just
you're
knew. Yeah.
yes, and I think more and more people are beginning to realise that actually so much more of the natural products out there, or just being, as you say, being in sunshine that they say is harmful. And you just wonder, how is it that we've swallowed this nonsense that man can manufacture something with petrochemicals that is supposed to do much better when we've been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and yet in the last 100 years or so, suddenly all of these things are dangerous. And it just boggles my mind. It's as if we were only born yesterday, and that if we don't rely on these man-made products, we couldn't possibly survive. It does seem totally mad to me, and you've just hinted there that that adhering to more natural ways are more likely to be advantageous than some of these pharmaceutical or manufactured chemical-based products, which have so many toxins in it. That why would you even entertain the idea?
I think also I haven't taken any pharmaceuticals for years. So that was even in me before the diagnosis. So it's not as though I suddenly turned to this alternative route. But I also knew friends of mine that said, well, why don't you do this? And I said, well, because I've been advocating natural health for years. I said, I'd be a hypocrite to suddenly take chemicals when I've always said the natural way is the best way. So even now, my home, I don't have any Wi-Fi. Everything is category 5 or plugged in. I don't have a smart meter. I had it actually taken out. I live in the country, miles away from anywhere. So hopefully there's not many frequencies kind of floating around, because all these things are part of it. And I think this is why I ground, because if I've been into a city or a town that's got lots of Wi-Fi, I always feel very drained and very tired when I get home. But fortunately, I don't have any Wi-Fi here, which is really good. People think I'm a little bit backward, but with technology, why haven't you got Wi-Fi on 24/7? Because it doesn't agree with me. It does give me headaches. And since I've had that taken out, I just feel so healthy all the time. It's healthy. Even looking out of the window now where I am, I'm just looking at trees and the birds and the green lawn, and yeah, it's just healthy.
It is interesting. It's a bit of an irony, isn't it, that we call the medical interventions and the NHS and all of this an alternative, as the current thing. We call the healthy stuff an alternative. It should be the other way around.
Yeah,
That
because they've only been going just over, is it 130 years kind of
yeah,
medicine, and the
they're the
other stuff's been
alternative.
going for thousands. So why are we calling this route the alternative when,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, and that I think that will be something for people to think about. That we've got these labels the wrong way round. That natural health is clearly got to be, as you say, if you have an accident, if you have a car accident, and you know you need to be extracted from a vehicle, and you need your legs and stuff sorted out, or whatever it is, or emergency, those sort of things. Clearly, that's where those professional surgeons and what have you, if they can put you back together again pain-freely, then obviously that's a completely different
Yes,
thing
it is. Yeah.
from what we've been talking. Edina, it's been wonderful to talk to you about your incredible journey and your choices there. I would definitely urge people, if they would like to get a copy of the book, presumably it's available from online retailers and all of that.
Yeah, the main online retailer.
Yes,
Yes.
without having to give
Plug
them
them.
a plug, but I'll put a link in the description. And you write very beautifully and easily to read, which is always good when you're talking about medical things, because some people go, "Oh, it's a medical book, I can't watch that," but it's really a life story. And it was lovely of you to send it to me. And write in there, just for the sake of telling the audience, that you wrote in there, "To Richard, my favourite YouTuber." So
Absolutely.
so thank
I've
you.
learned so much. Yeah.
Well, I'm on the same journey, so I'm learning as I go. But Edina, it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sending the book. I hope the audience, you've got something out of this. I'm sure you have. And it gives you some thought-provoking moments, I hope.
Yeah.
And let's hope that there are no more people having to have that situation just before Christmas where they're waiting for... I mean, unfortunately, there will be. Of course, we know that. But there may be other things to think about too. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
I will be back very soon with more monologues and, of course, more wonderful interviews. But from Edina and myself, thank you for watching and goodbye.